your goodie bags, there's a copy of the June issue of Memphis Magazine, which is hot off the presses today. And it's, as you can see, it's called the Culture Issue. This is the third year that we have devoted the entire contents of our June issue to celebrating the cultural ambiance, passion, and diversity of our own truly distinctive American city. This year we decided to add an event component to our celebration of our city's sense of itself. And borrowing the title of a 1987 Pulitzer Prize winning novel, which many of you may have heard of, called A Summons to Memphis, written by Peter Taylor, a Memphis native, we have titled this event, as the book is titled, A Summons to Memphis, intending to kick off the summer every year by summoning someone to our city who can speak with authority from his or her perspective about the role culture plays in determining the character, the spirit, and the essence of the places we all call home. And after spending this morning with Mayor Landrieu, I must say that we could have searched the world over for someone who meets the above criteria without coming close to finding a more perfect first honoree for this first Summons to Memphis event. There isn't a city in America, maybe in the world, where culture plays a more critical role in shaping both the civic identity and urban economy of a place more than culture plays a role in the well-functioning city of New Orleans. And there cannot be another mayor in America more attuned to that concept of culture as an economic engine than Mitch Landrieu. You didn't come here to hear me talk, so I'll stop now. I will call your attention to the brief but formidable biography of our honoree today in your program on page 2. And that just about says it all, and I think that will explain to you right away why he's such a perfect fit for this inaugural event. All of us, one last thing before we start, all of us with Memphis Magazine must say thank you to 3 individuals who made today possible. One of them couldn't join us and sent his regrets, and that was Ross Taylor, Peter Taylor's son, who graciously allowed us to title this event in the name of his late father's novel. But here with us today are 2 sisters, Paula Jacobson, who many of you in this room know well, who is director of the Labana Foundation here in Memphis, and her twin sister, Ruth Coleman, who is visiting us with Mayor Landrieu from New Orleans and serves as an advisor to the mayor. Please join me in thanking both of them for making this very special gathering a reality. Thank you, Paula and Ruth. Without further ado, then, the Honorable Mitch Landrieu, Mayor of New Orleans.
Kenneth, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And it is true that I would not be here were it not for Ruth and for Paula. Ruth is a dear friend of mine. She also is one of the city of New Orleans' great philanthropic leaders and leaders in education and a lot of other issues. And of course, to Paula, her wonderful sister, and to the whole Coleman family, we love you guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me. Kenneth, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Henry, thank you so much. And Ward, thank you so much for guiding me around today. I really appreciate it. And I thank all of you for having me today. First of all, just so we can get the etiquette right, I'm one of 9 kids. I'm the 5th. I'm used to sitting at the head of the table and talking and nobody listening to me, so y'all keep eating. I promise you it's no big deal. And on the way here today, I was thinking, well, what am I going to talk to these people about? But I walked in this morning, right, and I saw the ducks. And I thought to myself, ducks and grizzlies, ducks, grizzlies. Why do they need me to tell them what to do? Anybody, any city that can turn a duck walk, right, into a cultural event has enough creativity and imagination to conquer the world. What, are you kidding me? And I'm sorry about your Grizzlies. That was a tough loss for you, but let me tell you something. That's a huge success. You know, they haven't been, right? I thought the Heat were going to get you, but you got gotten a little bit earlier. I can tell you this, though. The city of New Orleans has lived through a number of basketball teams. Back in the day, we had the Jazz, and they somehow absconded to Utah. Now think about that idiosyncratic situation, the Utah Jazz. You just think about that for a moment. And then we wound up getting the Hornets. We have a new owner. We have a local owner now, Tom Benson, and they decided that the Hornets weren't indigenous to New Orleans, so we had to come up with a new name. We needed something ferocious. We needed something aggressive. We needed something that was scary, so we picked the Pelican. Now that shows y'all's ignorance. Let me tell you something. The Pelican's a bad bird. Do not mess with the Pelicans. You understand? So I was watching the games the other night, and I was pulling for you. This young man came and interviewed me last week, and I told him, I don't know, the Miami Heat's looking pretty good. I got a kid that hates the Miami Heat. My youngest of 5, William, can't stand him, can't wait for him to get beat. So you can imagine the bets that we have going back and forth, and he's winning so far. But I really do want to let you know that I watched, and the reason I watched is because in the city of New Orleans, the sports franchises there have been so important to the health and to the wealth of the city. There's a kind of a debate that goes on all the time for people that say, quit spending money on sports franchises and cultural institutions. Spend your money on education, spend your money on health care, spend your money on infrastructure, spend your money on police and fire, as though somehow they're separate. Well, it took Katrina for us to recognize that any place that creates a space for people of different races, different geographic backgrounds to gather and to enjoy the same thing and to understand the symbolic significance of going from worst to best is a good place to be. And I think that you saw that the other night, and that's why that should be looked upon not as a failure, but as a great success and as a very important part of organically what makes Memphis as special as she is. So I'm thrilled to be summoned here. I have to be honest with you because I'm a good Catholic boy and have good Catholic guilt. When I get summoned someplace, the first thing I think about is my mom is standing at the door at 6 o'clock calling us to come in, waiting for me with a switch because we didn't come in at time, so I was a little bit nervous about coming. But I said this morning when I have a chance to talk to your mayors and to some other distinguished business and community leaders, the fact that Memphis has created this event is a very positive thing. I don't know how much like New Orleans you guys are, but back in the day, our attitude was we were the best at everything. We didn't need people who were not from here telling us what to do. And by the way, when there was an opening, we ought to hire somebody from New Orleans, and we never ought to look at the best and the brightest. And if you went away to college, don't think about coming back because you left. Does that sound familiar to anybody? It's better to say we're not the best at everything, even though we've got a lot of good things going. There are other people that know better than us. All of our kids that left, we hope you got educated at the best schools, but we expect you to come back and we expect you to serve. And by the way, there is something called best practices because this is America, and we do have things called laboratories of innovation and change. They're called states and they're called cities, municipal governments, communities that learn how to do better things, and we ought to learn from each other and take what somebody has and use it because in this country, that word indivisible, right, means that we're all connected. And that means economically, it means socially, it means racially. It means that if you can see yourself that way and you can be open to the fact that you can get better, then you can create a thing called a summons. And that is a very positive development in any community's maturation process, which, by the way, is always changing and it's dynamic. People say the only thing that's certain is change. Everything changes all the time. Now, you can deny that and you can ignore it, or you can kind of get with it and roll with it. It's like trying to swim against the tide of the Mississippi. Why don't somebody go out there, jump in the river, try to swim against the current? That doesn't work so well. You might want to think about where's the current going, how's the river flow, why don't I just kind of get in it and see if I can steer myself where I can go that's going to help make me safe and happy and thoughtful. It's just a different way of thinking. Now, I am really, in the essence of the word, humbled by the fact that y'all have asked somebody from New Orleans to come maybe say, what are you guys doing down there that we can do? Because the people in the city of New Orleans are not used to being the first at much. We know that we're pretty good at Bourbon Street. We know that we're pretty good at muffaladas. Thank you for the chef, thank you, and the shrimp. We know that we have been historically good at showing people a good time. But for a long time, people said about New Orleans, well, it's a nice place to visit, especially if we don't tell people what we did when we went down there. Some very guilty laughs in here. But we don't really want to look to New Orleans for advice on health care, or education, or infrastructure, or more particularly how government works. But a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, as we like to say. We were inflicted with a catastrophic event that, for the most part, at least in my opinion, a few short years later, have given the people of New Orleans and Louisiana a wake-up call that we either now have the choice to take advantage of or to waste. And so I explain it best this way, something that all of you can relate to. If you ever have a near-death experience in your family, somebody with cancer, somebody that had a heart attack, somebody that died unexpectedly, if you knew somebody or you were the victim of something bad that may have happened to you, either man-made or natural, like a tornado or a hurricane, if you ever lost anything in your life, it has a way, without you volunteering for it, of refocusing your attention. It's called a near-death experience. Most of the time, people use those to do something different. A lot of times, people just go back to doing the same, but that's a choice people make. And so as a community, we in New Orleans had that event, Katrina, to kind of wake us up. Now, what is clear to us, anyway, because we got into a moment of introspection, which you will do when you lose all your clothes and you don't have a house and all you have is your stuff in a garbage bag. You tend to be introspective, like what the hell am I going to do now, right? We recognized, because we took a moment to be honest with ourselves, that Katrina and Rita, by the way, we had two of those things. As a matter of fact, without me crying too much, September 11th, people stopped traveling. We're a tourist economy, 80,000 jobs, $5 billion. Our numbers went from here to here in 3 years, while we were fighting 2 wars on a credit card. So the country didn't have much help for anybody economically. And then right when we got back up, Katrina hit. Then a couple of weeks later, Rita hit. Katrina's little sister hit us on the west side. Then we had Ike, then we had Gustav, then we had the national recession, then we had the BP oil spill. Then we had locust. I'm just kidding. Then, it can get worse. We had a lot of stuff, okay? And I mentioned about the time frame that it happened in, because remember, this happened between 2000 and 2010. A lot of that has to do with when you get hurt and somebody can come help you, do they have anything in their pocket to help you with? So between 1990 and 2000, remember early in 1990 we got out of the first Gulf War, but otherwise the rest of that century was pretty good. The stock market was up, the nation was, had balanced books. You know, we had Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton were fighting, but they were figuring out how to get things done, and we won in 2 wars, right? But between 2000 and 2010, we were in the middle of the Iraq and Afghani war. We were spending $7 billion a month, $1 trillion over 10 years. Stock market was crashing, economy was bad. If you got hurt, right, you were kind of like, we'll do the best we can to help you, but everybody else has got stuff to do too. Wasn't the greatest time to be in a catastrophic event anywhere in the United States of America, but we had all of those things. But the really hard blow, obviously, was Katrina, which, by the way, just for the record, was a man-made event. It wasn't a natural event. We get hurricanes all the time. They come in, they go out, we get wet, we dry off, we build back, we're good to go. Been doing it forever. But what happened was the levees broke. Y'all been reading this story about all these bridges that are challenged? America's got an infrastructure problem, right? But the problem is people thought that we kind of wished that on ourselves or there was something wrong with us. you know, or we didn't pray to the voodoo priestess, you know, as much as we should have, and we deserved it, some crazy stuff. As opposed to kind of being like everybody else in America, like the 85% of the other people that live by the coast. Did you know 85% of the people in America live by water? How far is it? Mississippi's not too far from here, huh? Is it close? It's high. It's high. Have y'all noticed? Should pay attention to it. Let us know when it gets high. Call us. It's coming. So one of the things that happened after Katrina is that the people of New Orleans took a moment and did a lot of introspective work and said, you know, Katrina and Rita, notwithstanding the fact that it was a man-made disaster, we didn't cause it ourselves, hurt 500,000 homes, destroyed 250,000, killed 1,700 people. All of the things that we learned there, the most insightful thing was that a house is not a home, that it was not the physical structures that actually made a community. No matter how many churches were destroyed, or hospitals, or cars, or schools, it was the people that mattered, and it was the soul of the community that either gave it life or gave it death. That was it. The physical stuff is replaceable. As hard as it is, and as painful as it is, the soul of the community was not in its buildings. It was in its people. And what was in its people was its history, its authenticity, it's what was created over time. That's the essential learning moment of Katrina. And then the next point is, well, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to handle what it is that came your way? So we had this terrible adversity. Some people who were selfish and not right-minded saw it as an opportunity to take advantage. I'm going to get into an area that other people lived in, kick them out, I'll do something different there, my values will go up, I'm good, I don't care what happens to them. Some people thought, well, it's an opportunity, but you know what, it's a responsibility too, which means that we've got to fix it. Now, when you get into what does the fix-it mode look like, you have to say to yourself, what are we going to try to put there? The instinct is to put it back just like it was. That's the wrong instinct. It's a natural instinct, because you will go back to what is the most secure thing that you have that makes you feel good. But if you take a moment and you think to yourself, what should we always have been? How did we get to where we are? Good and bad. Then it will take you into a different place. And so as you summon people here, I suppose that you're summoning them to ask them, how can you help us think through how to be better? And what is it we need to be better? I joked with you a little bit about the Ducks and the Grizzlies, but let me tell you something. Memphis is an awesome place. When you think about what you have here, you've got Fortune 500 companies. You've got a bucket load of them. You know how many we have in New Orleans? One. You've got great music. You've got great food. I'm not going to tease you all about your barbecue because I know it's a sensitive subject and you think it's better than everywhere else. I'll give it to you. You got good barbecue. We got good beignets. We got good something, right? You have a river. You have great land, you have great air, you have great water, you have foundations, you have businesses, you have medical centers, you have the best children's medical center in America. I would just simply say to you, Memphis has everything she needs to be great. Period, end of story. You already have it. The question that you have to ask yourself is, well, if we already have it, right, well then how come we're not as great as we think we should be? And why do we listen to other people tell us we're not as good as we should have been? Really, from my perspective, and I've only been a mayor for 3 years. I was a state legislator for 16, I was a lieutenant governor for 6. Those jobs were hard, but they're not really as hard as being the mayor. And the reason is because a mayor has to figure out how to do something. Everybody in this room, don't even raise your hand, got a lot of opinions about what to do, and I'm sure you feel strongly about it. And I'm sure if Mayor Wharton were here right now, or Mayor Landrieu was here, you would tell him exactly what. But if I really kind of put my finger in your chest and asked you, okay, smart aleck, tell me how to do it, you would go something like this, blah, 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 blah. That's why we hired you, right? And so what has to happen is the community as a whole has got to come together if you want to win. This is if you want to win. Let me say something to you. Not everybody wants to win. Somebody wants to beat somebody else individually. Somebody wants to be the new boss. Somebody wants to win over here, somebody wants to get, but not everybody wants to win as a community. And when you ask yourself, what does it mean to win as a community? it's going to take you to a different place than how do I beat somebody else. They're very, very different questions. How to build something back the way it was is a different question from how to build the thing that we always could have been. The city of New Orleans, for example, in 1960, now, since I'm in Memphis and I'm living in the Deep South, let's talk about race for a second. I don't want to go back to 1960. But the first thing people that divide say was, he wants to go back to 19. I didn't say that, but people heard it. In 1960, the city of New Orleans had 690,000 people in it. We were bigger than Houston. We were bigger than Atlanta, right? And now, in the year 2013, 5 years away from our 300th anniversary, right, we have 100,000, right, less than what we had when Katrina hit, and that was 460, so we're at 360 now. So if we're at 360,000 now, and we were at 690 in 1960, I think an honest self-assessment could be that somebody made some bad mistakes somewhere along the way. Now, I'm not blaming anybody in particular, right, except everybody. And say, well, look, if you want to look at us, if you count yourself as doing better by having more people, which is what most metropolitan areas do, and we have less people, something happened. But it wasn't just the last mayor, or the mayor before that, or the business community that didn't listen to the political community, or the African-American community that didn't listen to the white community, or whatever. It was kind of all of us did something to get us from where we were to where we are now. That's worth looking at. It's a hard thing to look at, but it's worth looking at, and it's worth asking yourself the question, if we want to be as good as we were at some point in our past, or we want to be as good as we always should have been, what is it that we're doing that's helping us get to the good thing, and what is it that's helping us stay in the bad thing? And I know this sounds elementary, but for some reason, smart people like us have a very difficult time figuring out that it's smart to do the good thing and not smart to do the bad thing. Because good decisions equal good consequences, and bad decisions equal bad consequences. So one of the things we in New Orleans started to do after Katrina was like, you know what, we may not have another chance. We better kind of get this figured out. And why in the world did we wait until we had a life-altering experience to make the decision? So the question for Memphis, as you haven't had a natural catastrophe, is what are you waiting for? Really, what are you waiting for? How's your school system doing? Is it doing as well as it should be doing? Fix it. How's your healthcare system doing? What are your healthcare outcomes for your folks? You have a high mortality rate or a low mortality rate? What's your infant, birth weight look like, statistic? What's your death rate for people that have cancer? How's it looking on the incidence of diabetes for you, right? If it's not looking good, fix it. What are you waiting for, right? On the political side of it, how's your political leadership doing? You elected new political leadership. Give them some room to run, help them, hold them accountable, but give them the resources they need to do their job. Let me tell you something. I'm here for both of them. I know you got a Republican and you got a Democrat, right? You got Mayor Luttrell, right? He's a Republican, county. You got Mayor Wharton. Both of them will tell you that government needs to be smaller. Government needs to be more efficient. Government needs to be more effective. The mousetrap of governing that they inherited, right, is not the same one that they need for a 21st century economy, and they want to change things, right? But they will also tell you that they can't put gas in a police car for free, and you cannot have something for nothing. And I'm sure everybody in here wants it, because this country is in a mode of let's do less, right? And the mantra for mayors like me is do more with less. I have a big billboard for you. Less equals less. Less equals less. Maybe in the philosophical world of I'm not responsible, less equals more. But 2 equals 2. 3 doesn't equal 2, 1 doesn't equal 2, and less equals less. That doesn't mean that government can't be better, more effective, more efficient, smaller, more consolidated, and it is possible, ladies and gentlemen, for government to be too big and too small at the same time. It is absolutely possible. You know why? Because we're smart enough to figure out which part of government is old, outdated, inefficient, doesn't work anymore, that we don't need, and that we have to take those savings and invest it in the things that really matter. The real fight is figuring out which is which, and then having the space to do it and not letting the politics of dissension get in the way of figuring out what is. Now, they can't do that on the government side if the community has not gotten together on the private sector, not-for-profit, faith-based side and come together with one vision for the city. And I'm not just talking about that which city government does, because here's the new reality. The global economy is tough. Washington is getting out of the business of doing anything. The state governments are saying, not us, right? And what's happening is all of that, whatever government's role is, whether you like it or don't like it, is going to get more robust and everything's going to get more local. And this is what this means. Nobody's coming to save you. So you got to do it yourself. And the thing that's going to allow you to do it yourself is partnerships and common ground. Those are the two new ways. So I could stand here with you and talk about education, and I will if you ask me questions about it, or health care, or whatever the answer to the question is about the thing, but I really would prefer to talk to you more about the way, because the way of getting to the thing is important. It's like for those of you that play golf. Once you get your golf swing down, it doesn't really matter what club you're swinging, right? Same thing is true with tennis. Same thing is true with anything that you do. It is about the way, right? And the new way that works, the one that we've found in New Orleans, is partnership. You got to break down the racial barriers. We live in two deep South cities. My guess is, I haven't spent a lot of time in Memphis, but you've got a racial diversity, right, that we have in New Orleans. 60% African American, 38% white, 2% other. That's Hispanic, or it's Asian, or it's something else. Same thing in the city of New Orleans. And when you expand to the county, the numbers change somewhat, but for the most part, here's the thing, we all live together. Or do we? So if we don't, we don't. Or if we do, we do. That's kind of the way it works. And it's not going to sit there and stay static. It's going to continue to have an impact. And unless we reach out to each other and work and make sure that the entire community is involved in everything that we do. And by the way, y'all, I'm talking to everybody in here. I'm not just talking to some people. Because certain rooms look a certain way, then other rooms look another way. But at the end of the day, guess what? They all converge at the table at the House of Representatives or in the City Council. They manifest and say, so why don't we get to it earlier before we get there? Come up with a vision, and then let the political leaders that we elect take us to the vision that we set for ourselves. That's called community. It's called a single voice. It's called common ground. Now, I'm going to warn you about something. You have people in this room that don't believe in common ground. I call them 50%ers, right? The way it works is, if I got 50% plus one, I can beat you every day. But the problem is somebody can flip that one, right? Or flip that two and make you 49 rather than 50% plus one. How about living and governing on the 66% model, right? If you can come up with an idea that 66 to 67, 68% of the people agree with, right, you can pretty much get everybody to say, that sounds like common ground to me, because what that forces is a community to yield, right, and to find something that works for almost everybody. And something that works for almost everybody is always better than something that just works for half the people plus one. That will force you into a new place. What that does is take the folks on the far this side and the far that side and say, listen, your views are important. We really, really want to hear them. They should inform what they do, but they should never stop us from making progress. And so you need to create a space where you can have a hard, difficult debate like adults, civilly, that doesn't ruin relationships, that gets you to a step forward. See, this has got to be the thing. We can yell and we can scream and we can fight, we can get mad at each other, but at the end of the day, before we leave this room, we have to agree that we're going to take a step forward. And that method, right, in terms and in line with creating partnerships, right, let me spell out what a partnership looks like. It means that government can't do everything by itself. Not enough money in the taxpayer's pocket to raise taxes high enough for government to do everything, number one. Secondly, it's not government's responsibility to do everything. There's a real serious thing out there that's lacking in the United States of America. It's called personal responsibility. And doing things you're supposed to do for yourself, or that your family's supposed to do for you, and waiting for government to do everything, as opposed to expect government to do everything for you. There's a lot of that out there. There are also a lot of things out there that only government can do, that no matter how much money you got in your pocket, you can't do better than me, like build a street in front of your house. Have you ever tried to build a street by yourself? You should try it. And for those of you that don't believe in government, try to build a playground too. Or better yet, try to build a bridge. Put the nickels together with your neighbors just to fix the street in front of your house. In the city of New Orleans, your numbers might be different from mine by about a 4-block stretch, cost you $5 million. So everybody that thinks they can do it on their own, build a bridge, build a road, call me later. When there's a pothole, I'm not filling it. You understand? We need to have a serious discussion about what is personal, right? What everybody can do by themselves, when government shouldn't do something that somebody should do themselves. But on the other hand, there are certain things that only you as a community can do together. And you are better together than you are apart. That is what I call facilitating, linking, and leveraging. Facilitate. Get to know everybody. Make sure that you link all of your assets together, leverage them to do more. So partnership looks like the government doing its part, the private sector doing its part, the faith-based community doing its part, the not-for-profits doing their part, and the foundations doing their part, everybody staying in their lane and everybody moving to a predetermined common ground that has a mandate for you to get something done and tomorrow to be further ahead than you were yesterday. That way, right, is better than we're looking for a white mayor or a black mayor, or there are not enough African Americans in the business community, or we've got it, whatever. All of us kind of have this thing. But how we speak to each other and how we organize ourselves to get to the yes is really the most important thing. And so in the city of New Orleans, although, listen, we got a ton of problems. We got a lot more to go. Our mountain is really high to climb, which is why I'm humbled that y'all even asked me to come, because from our perspective, we've just got a long way to go. But one of the things I think that we can say for certain, that we feel really good about, is that we stopped the bleeding. We actually stopped the city from bleeding out, right? We kind of stabilized the patient. We have her up on her feet, and she is marching for the first time in a very, very long time in the right direction. So if you can imagine, 7 years ago, we were 17 feet underwater, right? We were done. Everybody said the city of New Orleans is over. There's no way they can survive. And by the way, on the day that the storm hit, they were on the bottom of every list, right, that really mattered. 7 years later, the Forbes magazine says we're the #1 place in America to do business. We're the fastest growing city in America right now. Last year, we won the World Tourism Award. We didn't win the New Orleans-Memphis Standoff Battle Under the Oaks Award for tourism. We won the World Tourism Award last year. We are one of the places where most of the smart people in America are moving because New Orleans has become cool again. Brookings Institute says that, you know, we're one of the greatest hubs for entrepreneurship in America. How did that happen? And by the way, in education, because of our new school reform movements, the achievement gap between kids in the inner city and kids in the rest of the state, here, black kids and white kids, so we don't need to talk in coded language, right, is closing faster than any place else in the country, and we're almost surpassing it. We had a high graduation rate in New Orleans last year than every other parish. We have parishes, not counties, in the state. That means that New Orleans is not the greatest city in the world, but what it means is this city and its people, right, got tired of fighting all the time and getting nowhere and decided for a very brief moment in time, and by the way, like 3 years in the history of the world is a nanosecond, right? For a very brief history of time, got ourselves to common ground, and we started winning. And you know what? We really, really, really like it. We're very hungry. We're very aggressive. We are now open to people coming in, like you have with me, and said, tell me what to do. Mike Bloomberg, come help me figure out what you did in New York. Mayor from Philadelphia, right, Mike Nutter, come tell me what you did. Daley, who was in Chicago, and now Rahm Emanuel, tell me what we did. Jerry from San Diego, please come tell me. You got a little customer service piece over there that's working really well, so when people come into City Hall, they actually leave with a smile on their face? That's a good dream, isn't it? Right? Tell me what you're doing out there. Mayor Menino in Boston. I really understand that you really got to work on violent crime. I don't understand it. I know Boston's not that different from New Orleans. Tell me what's going on in your neighborhood so we can get it. Right? What does that look like? The people of New Orleans, we want to change our education system. So what are they doing around the country? They weren't doing anything that we like, so we created our own thing. And now have a charter school movement that's second to none. 88% of our kids are in charter schools. We used to have a school system. Now we have a system, right? We have a system of schools now, right? And not a school system, where we took the power and pushed it down to the school site where the principals are. We let the principals hire and fire that teaches. We created accountability measures. We created measurement sticks, and we gave parents involvement. And that model can exist, by the way, in traditional public schools, or it can exist in charter schools, and it can exist in private schools. So don't get stuck on who the boss is. That's a bad place to get stuck in education. That's an adult conversation. Who's going to be the chair of the board? Are you listening to me? Do not get stuck on who the boss is going to be. Get stuck on, are the students doing better? That's where you need to get stuck, because that will take you away from ideology. That will take you away from discussions that parents normally have, and that will take you always to what is the pathway so that my kid has an opportunity to learn and will do better. And by the way, for those of you that are ideologically bent, and most of us are, it's not going to take you where you think. So you're looking at a mayor. I'm a Democrat. I believe in government, right? But I'm going to tell you that as mayor of the city of New Orleans, my ideology has become challenged, right? So now as mayor of the city of New Orleans, when you bring me a problem, I don't ask the question, is this something that the democratically controlled legislature or Congress or the president wants me to do? I don't ask myself, is this something that the Republicans are going to be against? What I ask myself is, what works? Tell me what works. And then I will tell you what I'm going to do, because every mayor in America does not have the freedom to be ideologically bent. We are problem solvers. And guess what? In cities, that is exactly what you need. So for all of you that got your own politics on the state level or the federal level, park it at the door as it relates to Memphis, and let yourself design something that works. If you do that, that will take you in different directions depending on what the issue is. I'll give you an example of emergency response. So Katrina hits, right? FEMA is in the room, so we're all emergency now operators. We're getting people out of water. We're trying to get buses to people to get them to someplace, right? And we had to feed people. Now, we wanted to privatize the evacuation, so we hired a bunch of buses to be ready if a storm hit to come get our folks, right? But we couldn't do that with food. Anybody here ever eat a meal ready to eat, an MRE? All right, these are the things they give you in those little packets that you have to eat when you're starving and you'll eat anything, all right, and you're really hungry. And the federal government has bucket loads of them, and they'll send them down. So that's the government, right, giving us food, but the private sector was giving us buses. Well, here's what happened. The private sector never showed up. You know why? Because the market dictated that there was another storm in Florida, and they couldn't be in two places once, so they went there. And we didn't have any buses. So we had to commandeer public buses that we own, that were run by the school system, to get people out. Private sector didn't work, the government did in that instance. Same day. The problem is people were hungry, and the MREs didn't get here because the federal government, this is for Katrina, didn't stage them at the appropriate time. So what did we do? We called a bunch of our chefs, best chefs in the world, Emeril Lagasse, John Besh. Say, hey fellas, what y'all doing? Well, we're wet. I said, you got a pot? You got maybe some rice and some stuff? I need you to feed some people for me. And so they set up on the roadside, and they started feeding 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 people, red beans and rice, gumbo, et cetera, et cetera. And guess what? The price per serving was half the price of what the government could pay by bringing down. So you had the exact same event, the exact same people, different need, and you had different outcomes. One was private sector, one was public sector driven. The same exact thing happens on the local level. So don't get stuck on ideology. When you reorganize yourselves as a delivery system, right, and you have to deliver health care, you have private institutions that do that. When you have to deliver public stuff, you have public institutions that do that. The partners that they need to fill in the glue are your faith-based communities, your not-for-profits, your foundations. Y'all have great foundations here. You have great private sector. If you can put all your stuff together, get rid of the duplication, get focused, and quit worrying about who's leading, and think about what outcomes you're delivering, you will find a way to get Memphis to the place where she always should have been. And I can just say this, notwithstanding the fact that I believe in a partnership between the federal, state, and local government, I will leave you with this. Nobody is coming to save you. You're it. That should make you feel good, right? And so the magazine that you have, the magazine that brought us here today, is a mirror. It is a reflection of who you are as a people? Does that magazine accurately reflect your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations, your fears, the challenges that you have? Are you being provocative? Are you really thinking about yourself, we could actually be great again because you were great once? The answer is yes. And so I'll leave you with this fairly sensitive subject. Dr. King was killed not too far from here at the Lorraine Hotel. You have one of the great museums in American history here. It's called the Civil Rights Museum. Some people say, oh, it's a terrible thing that Dr. King was killed in Memphis. It was, and it is. But if you think about how to turn tragedy into triumph, then maybe you think of what would it be if Memphis used that as the opportunity for African Americans and whites, right, the business community and the not-for-profit sector, to actually come together and to be the common ground and to be the great manifestation of what his dream was for America, and actually turn it not only into a place where people can come visit, but a way people learned how to live. Now that's a transformative idea, just as a community, because if you do that, and if you build those kinds of relationships, there won't be any walls between you when you try to build an education system or a healthcare delivery system. I can say this to you, that if you are a lot like New Orleans and Louisiana, and I believe that you are, then the same truths apply to you that apply to us. If you leave anybody behind, okay, they will be behind. They won't be in the front. That you all have to do this together, and responsibility cuts a whole bunch of different ways. It's absolutely true as it relates to any particular issue, but you've got to get at the table. You've got to talk to each other. You've got to be hard on each other, what I would like to say, hard on the problem and soft on the people. You've got to find a way to find common ground across race and across geography and across economics if Memphis is ever going to be as good as she can be. New Orleans has the exact same challenges. We're struggling through them every day. It's not something that you just do one day and you turn off because you got. It has to be a way of being. And changing the way we are is one of the most difficult things for all of us as human beings to do. But let me say this, success is not a fait accompli. There's only one way to do it, and it's with hard work. It's with perseverance. It's with continued commitment. But if there's no vision of where you're going to go, if there's no demand that we're going to get better, if there's no expectation or hope that we can be great, just don't show up for the game. But if there is, and you're going to come and play, play, and make it count. Because at the end of the day, if you do that, you will always become the city that you dream that you should be. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit, very quickly, if you could, about the World Cultural Forum and how you set that up. I think people would like to hear how and why you did that.
There's this event that takes place in Davos, Switzerland every year called the World Economic Forum. I had the occasion to travel there when I was lieutenant governor because they gave the state of Louisiana an opportunity to tell the world what happened during Katrina. And when I went to this little place, right, in Davos, it's a little bitty town. I mean, there's nothing there. But the whole world came and talked about stuff. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. New Orleans is a tourist town. Why don't we create a space where we can invite the world to come talk about things that are important to them? But what is indigenous about New Orleans? And it was culture. And at that time, as a lieutenant governor, I was responsible for culture, recreation, and tourism. But culture and recreation were basically passive activities. Show up at the club and listen to the music. Go to the state park and have a Winnebago, right? Enjoy tourism. I thought, well, what if it was culture and recreation were active? Like every one of the parks should be involved with all the local governments as it relates to recreation. There ought to be spaces not just where people, go rest. They ought to be where people play. The same thing was true with culture. When I grew up, Harry Connick was one of my contemporaries. Wynton Marsalis was as well. Patricia Clarkson, a whole bunch of people that went on to do big things. But the problem is they had to move away to ply their craft. They had to leave their families. And I always said, wouldn't it be great if New Orleans created a way to make money out of art, music, historic preservation? So we had this little discussion this morning about Nashville claiming to be the music capital of the world. It's not. And neither was Austin. But listen, you can laugh at them, but both of these cities have done a spectacular job of taking something they didn't create and monetizing it, so they're laughing all the way to the bank. They did a great job of creating an industry out of music. Now, everybody that is a kind of a wannabe singer, right, always thinks about, well, isn't it fun if I can get up on the stage with a guitar and sing, I'll be something. Well, the truth of it, if you want to make money in music, you got to write and be a publisher, because that's where the money is. You got to be a producer. You got to do all of that stuff. They make a lot more money. So every time you hear that song that Whitney Houston sang, "And I Will Always Love You," send Dolly Parton a nickel, because she wrote the song, right? Made a fortune off of that song. Every time somebody, if you go on TV and you see somebody, things called a residual check. Actors love residual checks. Any actor in here knows this, because they get paid for their intellectual capital and for their work. And so the idea was, how do you think about culture as an economic sector? You have to count it first. So in Louisiana, we actually counted it. And you could count it here. You got a lot of it, even though you don't know about it. But if you take all the jobs that are involved in art, music, historic preservation, tourism, every one of the young men and women that are waiting on you today, right, that are here, are making a paycheck out of tourism and out of the impact, catering, all of those things. In Louisiana, it's 144,000 jobs, 12% of our economy, right? $10 billion industry. So let me just kind of run some numbers for you. You know, because we have 38,000 hotel rooms within 16 blocks of each other, because we have what we have in terms of we get a Super Bowl every now and then. We've done more than anybody in America except for Miami, and we can do it with the lights out. So that impact is $400 million, economic impact. That was, by the way, the 24th big event that we had done in 14 months. We started off 12 months earlier with the national championship in football, right? And then shortly after the Super Bowl, by the way, which we did in between Mardi Gras. So we did one Mardi Gras weekend, then we did the Super Bowl, then we did the other Mardi Gras weekend. And Mardi Gras was a 250,000 person event, plus the millions that came on Mardi Gras Day. And then, right after that, we took about a week off, you know, and we rolled into things like the Zurich Classic, which is our national, you know, TPC tournament. And then we went into the French Quarter Fest. That was a 400,000 person event. And then we went into the French Quarter Fest, which just ended a couple of weeks ago, which is another 500,000 person event. And then soon we're going to be doing the Essence Festival, which is the largest gathering of African-American business leaders and media folks and entertainers in the entire country, which is another. So when people start talking about how sports, entertainment, and culture don't make money, tell the 80,000 people in New Orleans, right, that it's not a big industry. And it's not a grown-up industry like the oil and gas industry or like the biotech industry. Oh, yes, it is. We had to count that. And the reason we had to count it was so that we could show up at the decision makers' tables and say, you have a lot of citizens, all right, that are eating off of this. And by the way, it's important for them to know each other, because if they know each other, they'll start creating stuff. Remember the Facilitate, Link, and Leverage? Right? So all of these events started playing off of each other. So when the Zurich Classic is there, and Zurich International has all of their major suppliers in from all over the world, guess what they do when they get tired of watching golf? They run over to the Jazz Fest and watch Bruce Springsteen, or Billy Joel, or Aaron Neville, or the Mardi Gras Indians. You see, and then one thing starts to feed the next, and all of a sudden that 12% grows to 14, 16, 18, and the economic impact goes from 5 million to 9 million to 10 million, and then by 2018, New Orleans, instead of having 9 million visitors, is going to have 13 million, right? And so one thing starts to feed the next. It becomes a virtual cycle of success. And it's another sector of our economy that we created out of almost whole cloth that didn't see itself that way before. You see, all of the things were already there. All of the things were already there. What we did was identify them, piece them together, leverage them, and then started creating new stuff. And that way is absolutely applicable to anything that you want to do. It's just a different way of making things happen. You can create something out of nothing. I wasn't really joking about the ducks. That is an amazing thing. I want you to think about how amazing that it is that somebody thought to themselves, I can get 150 kids to watch ducks walk down a red carpet and have them spend money while they're in there. People would have said, you're nuts. That's never going to happen. How are you going to do it? You did it. I know it sounds like a small thing, but people come from all over the place to see the ducks. He tried to run me upstairs in the elevator. I said, I need to see the ducks. It's a small thing, but let me tell you something. Somebody thought about something and created something out of nothing. and now you created something that people want to see. Really, what's so different about what it is that we do in our lives? It's important, and you can make it happen. Anybody else? I talked y'all to death. Took a dog off a meat truck in this place. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So from Memphis, and I'm sure New Orleans is facing the problem most cities are. We have pension issues, budget issues, unions, and dollars to get in the way of all these good things you're talking about. Any advice?
Yeah. Run. He said, I'm sure Memphis and New Orleans are a lot alike. You have problems with pensions and unions and all of that stuff. We have that. Do y'all have it? Do you have any advice? Is that a fair recitation of your question? So here would be my advice and my thoughts. As a country, my history's a little weak, but for the last 40 or 50 years, we made a deal with public employees. That was a bad deal for them and for us. And I was a public employee, remember, for a bunch of years. And I value public employees. I think they're good. We basically said, we're not going to pay you what we would pay in the private sector in terms of salaries, but we'll catch you back on the pension side. That was basically the deal. But what happened over time was, right, the public employees, through the legislative maneuvering, took advantage of the backside of it by making pensions richer than what they've turned out to be in the private sector. And what's happened is, because private sector salaries have gone down, now public salaries have almost gotten there, and there's a big gap in between. So almost every municipality and a lot of state governments have something called unfunded accrued liabilities, right? Which means that it's unfunded, it's accrued, and it's a liability. It sounds better that way, right? That means we're in a hell of a mess. That's Latin for you owe a lot of money. So you saw in the last presidential race this become an ideological issue. So Scott Walker in Wisconsin and everybody, they tried to break the union, and they made pensions an issue. So that the truth was in there somewhere, but not kind of everywhere. The fact of the matter is, on local levels, and I don't know about Shelby County or Memphis City, but in New Orleans we have 3 or 4 pension systems. An employee pension system, we have a police pension system, and we have a firefighter's pension system. They're all different. The police and the pension system and the employee pension system is funded fine, because over the years what we did was we went to the employees and we said, listen, this is not going to work. We've got to make sure we have money for the folks that are going to retire. You've got to increase the amount you pay. We have to kind of make it a little bit, you got to stay a little bit longer, and it's going to balance itself off. And that worked fairly well as it relates to the city of New Orleans, except for the firefighters' pension, which was different. I love firefighters. They're heroes. They're awesome. They do a great job. Are we clear about that? Okay, so you heard me. I love firefighters. I don't like the firefighter pension system, though, because one of the things they were really successful at, because they were politically powerful in Louisiana, right, is really working the system so that the amount they pay in, right, and the length of time that it takes before they have to retire did match up with how much money they take when they get out early. So, for example, if you're a firefighter in New Orleans, you can start when you're 20, you can quit when you're 40, you can collect 100% for the rest of your life. And of course, life expectancy keeps getting better because healthcare keeps getting better. So what that means is the people of the city have to pay a lot. So right now in New Orleans, 10 cents for every dollar that comes in the city goes to the firefighters' pension fund alone. If taken by itself, it would be the 5th largest department. So I got a problem, right? I got to fix it. Here's my big political problem. The state legislature has decided that they're smarter than the mayor of the city of New Orleans is, and they run our pension system. And guess who's got most of the votes on the pension system? The firefighters. So that's a huge problem. Got to change. If you have a problem that is like that here, it's got to change. But it can't change in a way that is detrimental to the deal that was cut in the back. You got to do it going forward, because otherwise politically you can't get it done. But at the end of the day, I call this the law of gravity, right? It's called the hard work of governing. The law of gravity works something like this. If there's a pecan on a tree and it gets knocked off, unless somebody interrupts it, it's going to hit the ground. That's fair recitation of gravity, right? If someone doesn't fix the pension system, it's going to go bankrupt. That's just kind of the law of how stuff works. And so it has to be changed. And local governments across the country are facing this particular problem. Now, I don't want to scare you because there's no reason for Memphis to be scared or New Orleans to be scared. We're not close to going bankrupt. What I will say to you is, though, there are hard decisions that have to be made about how you finance government. And it's really kind of pretty simple. You either have to do with less or you have to give more. Or you've got to do a better job of delivering what you already have. You only have three choices. Now, it can be one of the three, or it can be a combination of all of the above. I kind of believe in all of the above because it works, it's easier, it's smarter. But here's what doesn't work. Give me more, I'm going to give you less. I'm going to keep taking, I'm not going to give. That doesn't work. Right, council member? Right? So you've been through this before. You're going through budget hearings right now, right? I'm not preaching for your mayor. I'm just telling you that to the citizens, right, you've got to fix it in some form or fashion, and if you don't fix it, it will otherwise eat away at you. Now, the reason it's hard to fix is because you can't really see it. It's just a line item on the budget. But for these council members and the mayors and the legislators, if that number's not right, they just have less to invest in the things that matter. So if you tell me that what matters to you is education, or if you tell me what matters is healthcare, or you tell me what matters is infrastructure or customer service, or making sure that businesses can move permits through City Hall faster, then it would be smarter to spend the resources there rather than on a pension system, right, that is going to hurt the city in a long period of time. This requires, in some instances, the customers, you, the citizens, to pay more. It requires the people who are receiving the pension to take less or to take it over time or to pay more into the system. But what can't happen is for us to continue to try to sustain financially what we will not pay for or what we take too much from. And I don't care whether you're on the left, on the right, on the middle. I don't care whether you're in government or out of government. No system can work if it's not financially sustainable over time. What we found in New Orleans, it usually takes an all-of-the-above approach, but as I said when I first started, it's not just about what to do, it's about how to do it. And human beings and politics and governance and political strength and the willingness or the lack of willingness of the community to support certain things is the thing at the end of the day that works. Because I'll leave you with this, because I'm going to assume, since y'all are so excited and jumping out of your seats, that nobody else has another question. I'll give you a real message that should come as a surprise to you, but shouldn't. At the end of the day, your elected officials and your representatives will follow your lead. They will do what you ask of them and demand of them as a community, but the community's got to be together, and the community's got to speak with one voice. If the community is separate and distinct and disparate and isolated and in silos and isn't speaking with one voice, your elected officials will reflect your view, because at the end of the day, most elected officials, and I mean most of them, and I've worked with a lot of them, want to make their constituents happy. They didn't get elected to say, I'm just going to go aggravate at everybody that put me in office. They want to be popular. They want to be well-liked. They want to lead. They want to leave a legacy. They want to do something that is good. But the problem is trying to have them do that when the community is split too. So at the end of the day, even though you elected them to be your leaders, right, it is a democratic process that we have, and you expect them to represent you. And there is a difference between leading and doing what the people want and knowing when to do both. At the end of the day, it is ultimately the people's responsibility to be responsible for the people's needs and the people's interest. And I assure you that if you come together as one people, you find that common ground. Your elected officials, with a lot of yelling and screaming, will ultimately get you where you say you want them to take you. Thank you. We got...
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Landrieu. This is the first, oh, not so fast. This being the first summons to Memphis we've ever actually executed, we have a little something for you. We don't have a trophy, but we thought it was highly appropriate if we gave you a copy of the book, Summons to Memphis. But before I give it to you, I have to say one word. Those of you here who know who Peter Taylor was and the author he was know a little bit about him. Those who know a little bit about him probably know that one of his great friends was none other than Ward Archer Sr. And Ward Archer Jr., who is chairman of the board of Contemporary Media, Memphis Magazine's parent company, has had a vision for doing this event for, most of the 20 years we've known each other. So I want to give a special round of applause to the man who kept us, those of us at the office says, we're going to do what? No, we put out a magazine in the newspaper. What in the hell are you talking about? But he kept on us, and what we see today is a great result. Thank you, board. And just to make this gift extra sweet, Mayor, I had a copy of this, but all my books are in the library at work, which is sort of a free lending library for the employees, and I don't know where it went. So this is from Ward's personal collection, and we'll get you one on Amazon one day soon. Thank you. Thank you. Look forward to